one of the books that had a huge impact on me was Speed of Trust by Stephen Covey. It's one of the first books I read, and it just totally changed the way I think about the word trust. But one of the things it does that's so wonderful is it gives you a really clear, like, here are 13 behaviors of how to trust people, how to behave in a trustworthy manner. I really took that to heart because I'm in the security business. I want people to trust me. It is a core part of my business. When I took those concepts out of that book and started using them in real life in my company, it had an amazing impact on the company and myself. The most interesting thing it immediately cleaved the company to two sides. Like, there were the people I could clearly trust because the minute I started behaving and putting those expectations of trust behavior on them, they just glommed onto that. But the people I couldn't trust, they just like immediately left.
And we're back for another episode of the Startup Hustle. This is your host, Matt Watson. Excited to be joined today by Mr. Andrew Plato. He's a serial entrepreneur, currently the founder and CEO of a couple companies called Zenacity and Screenopolis. Had one of the very first cybersecurity companies. He exited a few years ago. Been around the block, asked him earlier, and he's like, I don't know, I've been doing all this stuff for 25 years. What do you want to know? So he wrote a book about it called The Founder's User Manual, and we're going to talk a little bit about that today. And I'm sure we may cry a little bit together and have a beer and I asked him earlier if he would show me his scars. I think he's got some scars from this too. We're going to compare scars. It's going to be a good conversation. Andrew, are you ready?
I am ready. Thanks, Matt, for having me here today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, before we get started, I do want to remind everybody, today's episode is brought to you by Fullscale, which is my company. We have over 300 employees in the Philippines, helping people build all sorts of software. Front end, back end, mobile, QA, whatever you need help with, you can check us out. We can help you hire software developers for 60, 70% less than you would hire them in the United States. And we hire the top people you can find. So it's a great deal. Well, Andrew, welcome to the show, man. I wish everybody could see your scars. We are going to be on YouTube if you want to see them. Maybe he'll show them later. So check us out on YouTube.
Some of them are in places which I don't think people want to see.
Yeah, I think we get most of them. They're either in the rear end or punched in the face, right? Like, that's usually where they come from, being a startup founder.
Yep, that's exactly right. I have plenty of them on my face.
Well, first of all, tell me about, you have a long career, done a lot of different things, and you decided to write this book. Tell us a little bit about the book, The Founder's User Manual.
Sure. So it came out of I was having dinner with another founder, a friend of mine. Matt Ellis. He's run a number of startups, had some big exits, runs an AI company now. We were having dinner and we were talking about all the various war stories of running a startup, getting funding, almost running out of money, people freaking out, customers, whatever. And at some point in the conversation, after I had told one of my many fun stories from the past, he said, you should write a book about this. And I'm like, that's a good idea. I should write a book about it. Being a writer, I'm a lifelong writer. I mean, that's like my core skill set. Of all the things I can do, I can write. It just seemed like a natural thing for me, and it was partially a little bit of therapy. Writing everything I've learned over the decades down helped me kind of get it out. But it was also that I wish I had had some of this when I was starting my company or running my company. I wish somebody had given me that practical, pragmatic, reasonable advice of, just get all the theories and the kind of the talkative nonsense out of the way. How do you do the nuts and bolts of a startup company? And it's things like, how do you do collections, which is really important. You gotta collect the money you make. What do you do when, you're looking for investors and the investor starts giving you a lot of trouble or starts questioning your integrity or these kinds of things? What do you do when you have employees who are not showing up to work? How do you deal with those situations in a way that moves the company forward and ultimately gets you what you want, which, whether it's an exit or build a great company or all the above. I was fortunate that I built my company after many different iterations to have a really nice, lucrative exit from the company, which has allowed me to go on and do some of the more fun things I do, like write books.
Well, I feel like one of the challenges as a founder is we always have different challenges every month. Like it's some kind of new problem. And we probably need help every month, but we don't even know what help we need. We don't even know where to look for the help. And one of my favorite quotes is that you can't learn to swim by reading a book, right? Which I think is 100% true. There is no way to learn to swim by reading a book. And in some sense, I feel like entrepreneurship is the same way. Until you go through things, like you don't understand them. Like you can learn how to be a better swimmer by reading a book, but you're not going to learn how to swim by reading a book. You know what I mean? Like, and I think that's why books and other content, like this podcast as well, are helpful, right? Like, it's like, okay, now when I read this or I hear it, it makes sense. I know how to apply it. But if you heard it from the very beginning, you're like, I wouldn't even know what to do with this information.
That's a very good point. And incidentally, I'm a swimmer, so I swam this morning. So I know exactly what you mean about not being able to learn how to swim from a book. The thing about any book you read is that it a lot of times it gives you good ideas that you then can take into practice.
Yeah.
When I was struggling with my business, I was very fortunate, and it's something I would recommend all startup founders do, is I met with a CEO coach, sort of a chance meeting, and I connected with the CEO coach, and I joined a group called Vistage International. It was a pivotal sort of moment in my career. In that group, we read a lot of business books. Now, a lot of them were stupid, but a few of them really fundamentally changed the way I look at things.
And they can be littlest ideas, right? You get like one or two little ideas, little nuggets.
Exactly. One of the books that had a huge impact on me was Speed of Trust by Stephen Covey. It's one of the first books I read, and it just totally changed the way I think about the word trust. But one of the things it does that's so wonderful is it gives you a really clear, like, here are 13 behaviors of how to trust people, how to behave in a trustworthy manner. I really took that to heart because I'm in the security business. I want people to trust me. It is a core part of my business. When I took those concepts out of that book and started using them in real life in my company, it had an amazing impact on the company and myself. The most interesting thing it like immediately cleaved the company to two sides. Like there were the people I could clearly trust because the minute I started behaving and putting those expectations of trust behavior on them, they just glommed onto that. But the people I couldn't trust, they just like immediately left. So I think that's what's great about business books or any of these content is that it's not necessarily going to solve all your problems, but it'll give you some good ideas, some things to think about. And I think of my own book the same way. There's probably chapters of my book that are like, yeah, I don't care about that. Like, maybe you're not into sales. Okay, that's actually a big part of my book, but there's a lot of other things that are in there. Or maybe you're not so into the finance side of things. Well, I wasn't really either, but you can pick and choose those ideas that are really interesting and take them and bring them into your life and your business.
Well, I think books are very important, and I'm actually not much of a reader. I don't like to read books because I have some form of like ADHD or something that like does not really allow me to read books. So I have to be like really, really super motivated to actually read books. But they're super valuable, and there's been times like on certain topics where it was like a game changer, like learning about certain things. So I want to ask you, we talked before about some of the topics for your book, and one of them you mentioned I thought was really important was for a startup that you can't do everything like everybody else does. Tell me more about that and why that's important to startups.
Yeah, that's the change the conditions of the test, which I take that from Star Trek. I'm a big Star Trek nerd. So a lot of my things have Star Trek names. When you're a startup and you're small, you have limited resources. You have limited people, time, money. You're limited on everything. And you invariably are going to have bigger, better funded competitors. You can't go into a marketplace and say you're unique and special and different if you do what everybody else does, or you sound like everybody else. You're going to disappear in the noise. And this is so very important when you're a small company. You have to intentionally sound and look a little different. And that's not just have a unique website or an interesting, pitch for your sales team. It's the messaging, it's the words you use. Words can have a really big impact on how people perceive you, but the words you use can also have a big impact on kind of attracting people toward you. When I went into the marketplace with my cloud platform that I was selling, I mean, I was fighting against companies with billions of dollars and thousands of employees. I mean, who am I? I'm some little dinky, company in Portland, Oregon. I had to convince shoppers in this marketplace of information security that what I was selling was something interesting and different and special and kind of had a unique twist on everything. I couldn't do that if I just sounded like IBM. They were going to be
Right.
like, I might as well just buy IBM, right? Because if I buy IBM, I mean, nobody gets fired for buying IBM, right? So I had to think of ways to sound and look different. One of the ways I did that was just the marketing I used. I used particular words like our big phrase was compliance at ludicrous speed, which is I kind of picked up from Spaceballs. The point of doing that was that it made me sound different. When people would walk by that, they'd go, compliance at ludicrous speed. What the heck does that mean? It made them want to know more about me, and it gave me a chance to then talk to them about how my company was different, about how we had a unique offering, about how we were going about things in a unique way. The more I did that, the more it got people interested in me, and it got more interested in my company and what we were doing. So what I tell startup founders is all the time is it's really, really important that you are different and you sound different and you look different and you don't look like everybody else. And the problem is that a lot of people around you, employees, investors, and even your customers, might tell you that this is the wrong thing to do because it's scary to them. They're like, "Whoa, what are we doing here? Why are you using these, why are you using these strange words? Why do you sound?" So it's challenging to thread that needle between you don't want to be so different that you're like weird and
Well,
like
do you see this as niching down, or do you see this as just having a personality as a company?
it's having a personality. I think is a better way to do it. You don't want to niche yourself into a place where people are like weirdo, like I don't want anything to do with that. You don't want to make yourself ever repulsive to your to your
But
customers.
niching down is important for the same reasons, right? Like if I go to a lawyer's website and I'm like, I'm looking for a lawyer for a traffic ticket, but I don't see traffic ticket on their website, I bounce and I go somewhere else, right? So,
Right,
I mean, messaging is important for niching down too, right?
right,
I want to land on the homepage and it says all over, we help you with traffic tickets,
right.
blah, blah, blah. We guarantee it's X dollars, whatever. Like, and I'm like, I'm in the right place. Sign me
Right.
up, right? I mean, that kind of messaging is important too, but that's more for the niching part of it, right? Like to make sure your buyer clearly can self-select. They
Right.
can say, okay, this is for me, and they can easily make that decision. And the problem is if you do everything generic, literally nobody will do that.
Right.
Literally nobody will say, hey, this is for me. So you think you're serving everybody, but you end up serving nobody because nobody
Right.
can self-select.
This is a big problem in any cluttered marketplace, right? And my field of cybersecurity is incredibly cluttered right now. There's thousands of companies in this space, and it's really easy to just disappear inside that clutter. So it's a combination of how do you make it very clear what your value proposition is and the problems you solve, but then how do you give yourself a personality that again doesn't repulse people? And sometimes a personality can be, funny or cute or interesting, and sometimes it's just can be completely way off base. And that's the danger of anything that's a creative endeavor is that, you don't want to be so creative that you basically drive people away from you or you drive the wrong people toward you. And the example I always like to cite is LifeLock. Remember years ago, they had all this advertising with the CEO of LifeLock, and it's like, here's my social security number, try to break into me. He was attracting the wrong people to him with those ads. That was a creativity that you were basically telling people, do something illegal. You don't want to go that way. But then there's other companies who've done things that were, wildly creative, and they completely changed the market. And the one that always comes to mind for me is Apple Computer and the infamous, it's not infamous, the famous Think Different ad of 1984. That's a perfect example of a business that did something wildly different at the time, certainly for it, that completely changed the market, and it was incredibly creative. And everybody told him it was a stupid thing to do. Like everybody around, Jobs and the people there. So that's the kind of thing you've got to do, though, as a small startup. You need those moments where people can go, I want to know more about that. And that's exactly what happened with Apple, right? After that ad, everybody saw that and went, wow, that was pretty spectacular. I want to know more about that company. And the rest is history.
So we have the same challenge at Full Scale, right? We help companies hire software developers, but we have 1,000 competitors in India, Eastern Europe, Latin America. Like, how do we stand out from everybody else? And we're getting ready to start doing some testing of this where, people get a lot of spam about this stuff, right? Like, hey, you can hire software developers, blah, blah, blah. And so we were going to do, like, the first line of the email was going to be like, offshore development doesn't work, you shouldn't do it, and this is why, right? Like, how do we go the opposite direction? Like, we start the message with, like, you should not do this. It's a terrible idea. It doesn't work. But we can actually do it the right way, right? Like, how do you get people's attention in a different way and stand out? Like, to your point, like, it's really hard.
It is. It's not only just really difficult, but I think the other big mistake is, and this gets to something I'm very passionate about as a principle, is less is more. I get emails all the time, and I get marketing all the time, and it's like a wall of text. We do this, we're a globally dominant partner. I ain't reading that. I ain't reading it. I don't care. I don't care that you have this guy on your board. I don't care that you know so and so. I don't care that you worked at Microsoft back in the 90s.
You care how it's going to help you.
I care about one thing, which is how are you going to help me get what I want, and more importantly, are you somebody who is are you credible? And credibility is the name of the game in all tech, certainly, but I would say pretty much in anything you're selling today is how do you demonstrate your credibility to your customers? And
it's not
there's
different
a variety
than
of ways
anything else.
You can do that.
Like if you want to hire a plumber, I want a plumber I can trust, right? Like it's with everything.
Right. You want to know that this is a person who's done this a lot, who has a lot of experience, who's going to be able to come in and do whatever you need for plumbing and get it right the first time. You don't want a person who's learning how to do this on the job. And in technology or anything, that's another big challenge, is that you have to show people I know what I'm talking about. I've got the research and the data and the intelligence and the people behind all of this. One of the things I advise a lot of the startups that I work with is I'm like, you need to go out into the marketplace and you need to speak about the things that are interesting to people. Don't talk about your product. Don't talk about your competitors. Talk about things that are interesting. Talk about concepts that are relevant in your field. In cybersecurity, there's a lot right now with AI, of course. There's a lot going on with resilience. After this big CrowdStrike outage, resilience has become a pretty hot topic. There's a lot going on in moving target.
So much for high availability when every server has the same crap on it.
But there's a really interesting conversation to be had around that. And so the message is, okay, go out and talk about that with your customers. Demonstrate that this is something that you're thinking about and you care about. And maybe at the end you can mention, oh, and by the way, we've got products that'll help with this. Okay, that's great. The idea is that if you can establish that credibility with people and show them that you know what you're talking about, they'll want to work with you. They'll want to, you can attract them into you.
Build the trust first.
Yeah, rather than building the trust first, rather than just, we have this, don't you want it now? Because that sales methodology doesn't work anymore.
Especially for B2B sales, but it all depends on the type of product, right? Because some stuff we look for that trust very quickly. Like it may be 10 seconds. We're scanning, we're looking for reviews, we're looking for a suggestion from a friend. We're like, okay, yeah, the plumber sounds great, let's go. right? Versus other things, you're going to research for hours, days, weeks, months. You don't want to get fired for making this decision, and so it's all over the board. But definitely
Right.
for B2B, it's that way. And at full scale, that's what we see, right? Like, I have 60 customers. I don't have thousands of customers. I have 60, but almost every one of them comes to us because they know us through trust, referral, what have
Referrals.
you, or they listen to this podcast. Or like, Matt, I've listened to you for a long time.
Right.
You were the first person I thought of. I
And
trust you.
part of it is you're demonstrating credibility. You're demonstrating
Yeah,
that you understand it, that you're talking to interesting people about interesting topics,
you got to build
and
trust.
that's part of it. And the other part of it is that whenever you can get somebody else to talk about how awesome you are, that's
Even better.
that's even better, or give you an introduction. And it's another thing I advise all startups is you got to think about the people who you can befriend or who are your partners who can help you get where you want to do. But more importantly, how do you help them?
Right.
So in order for a partnership to work, you've got to be giving them something, and they got to be giving you something in return. And in my field, there's a lot of ways you can partner up and resell other technologies. I built a really good relationship with AWS, and that was a crucial part of my product was getting AWS kind of on board with that. And part of it was, they wanted to do this, and I knew how to do it, so it was a good partnership for us. But once that partnership was built, we were able to then help them meet some of their goals and objectives, and ultimately they did the same for us.
Well, I'd love to switch gears. And one of the other topics you had in your book had about being friendly with your employees. And it's kind of a controversial topic. And I have to say, I started two of the companies I started with before. Very much the management team that we had there became like some of my best friends. Like they felt like family. And, you know, but it's hard, especially when it doesn't work. I've also fired two of my sisters. My dad worked for one of my companies for 17 years. I've seen both sides of this work well and not work well. So I'd love to hear your view.
So I'll start with sort of telling a story and a little bit of background. So, I mean, part of this was, when I ran a business for as long as I did, I like a lot of people, I wanted people to like me. I wanted people to, yeah, I wanted to be a likable person. The challenge for myself personally is I'm kind of a cold, calculating. I'm I'm a transactional leader for the most part, and it's partially because I've got my mindset is very strategic. I think about, I played a lot of chess and these board games when I was a kid. My mind is one of where have I got to put all these little pieces, which doesn't always make me the most friendly person in the world, but I knew that I wanted to be friendly and I wanted to get along with the people around me. The challenge I found is that the harder I tried to kind of be everybody's friends, the more it ultimately backfired on me. And there's an incident that happened that really like cemented this for me as a leader. I was at a trade show. It's probably about 2018, 2019. It was for AWS actually, and it's a big event. And I went with a bunch of my employees, and there's this big party at the end of the trade show, and it's huge. There's music and there's food and there's games, and it's just this really big event. So yeah, I'm like, oh, let's all go to this and have a good time, and and pal around, and it'll be fun, right? And I thought of it as like, hey, I'm just hanging out with my team, and we can just be pals, and not think about work and all the are we closing deals or whatever. And so in this process, I challenged one of my employees to play a game with me, a video game, right? And we were playing the game, and it's a dumb game. I don't remember what it was, but I won. I beat the employee at the game. This was not much of an accomplishment, let's be clear. But, I was behaving like I would if I was around my buddies, right? I
Yeah,
was being all boastful, like, yeah, I beat you, ha ha ha. And the person I beat was also younger than me. They were a millennial, and I'm a Gen Xer, and I'm like, yeah, it's Gen Xers. I was behaving like I would with any of my buddies,
sure.
with any of my friends. I was behaving like me. I was being the Andrew Plato that is a goofball, that is boastful, that is, a little sarcastic, who ribbon my friends, right? All in good fun, right? Well, my employees saw that, and they saw that behavior, and they were able to later on twist that event and twist it into, well, look at Andrew. He's just a dictator. He's an a-hole. Look at how he's, berating us and, dominating us.
All because you beat them in a game.
All because I beat them in a game. And because multiple employees saw that, they corroborated each other. And this became one of the many negative sort of dictator narratives, I used to say, that started working against me. And it was completely unintentional. I certainly didn't intend for this to be, but I basically handed my employees an anecdote that validated something about myself that they wanted to believe, that I was a heartless, mean, domineering jerk who just wanted to push them around and had no compassion for their needs or wants, which of course wasn't true even in the least. But
See,
I handed them that anecdote by playing that video game with them. Whereas if I had just let them play on their own, or lost the game intentionally and said, "Oh yeah, good job," I would have never had that issue. So this is a case where, as a leader, you've got to really think through your interactions with your employees, because sometimes
they see you differently.
They see you. You're always the boss.
Yeah.
You could be out at a bar having a good time and a few drinks. You're still the boss, and they're still going to see you as the boss.
Well, and even more frustrating is a certain percentage of them, not necessarily all of them, but a certain percentage of them will always just tell you what you want to hear, too. They won't even give you their real opinion. They'll just, whatever it is, they'll figure out what it is you really want, and they'll just go to that. They won't even really tell you what they really think. Right. Which is frustrating, especially as a leader, because you want their help. You're like, what do you think of this? And they're like, what is Andrew?
And you want them to be honest with you, and to the point where I didn't even mind if they told me I was doing something wrong. So one of the tactics, and I mentioned this in the book, one of the tactics I did to solve that exact issue was I would give some of my key employees the card. And it was usually just a blank card, or maybe it had their name on it. And I said, look, this is your get out of jail free card. You can play this card on me anytime you want. And what it does is it gets you completely free of any, retribution. You can tell me anything you want. You can call me names. You can tell me I'm an idiot. You can insult me. You can tell me, you can completely and totally disagree with me, and you will suffer absolutely no consequences of that language. All you got to do is just put this card in front of me and say, Andrew, I'm going to play this on you, and here it comes. And I will back off, and I will shut up, and I will listen to you. And the first thing that happened is the employees actually didn't use the card very often. But it more importantly established the, I want to hear the truth. I don't care if it's bad. I'd rather you don't worry about my feelings. I'm trying to grow the business. I'm trying to push us forward. I'm trying to make this a better place for all of us. And I need to hear the honest truth. Now, that doesn't mean I had to do anything with it. Sometimes people would tell me things I didn't like to hear, and it was bad, but it doesn't mean I had to run off and change the entire business just because they didn't like something. And that happened pretty frequently, especially as the company was going through a lot of change.
Well, people just need a certain level of safety and security, right? So they feel like they can have that conversation.
Right. It was more about establishing a safety zone of, inside this space, you're okay. You're not going to get in trouble. You're not going to get fired or anything like that. And they needed to know that, because anytime when you have a sort of type A personality, or you're aggressive, or you're trying to push things forward, it's very easy for people to get scared about that and to fear that, it's all of a sudden you're going to go off in some other wild, direction, and they're going to get left behind. So establishing safety and security, the tactic I used of giving people cards, and there's a lot of other things you can do. That was one tactic I used. These are the kind of ways,
right? Because that also means being friendly to them, right? Like, to some degree, you got to be friendly with them. You got to build a rapport with them, especially with your other leaders, your other management team. Like, you've got to build the sense of a team with them, right? Like, you can't be totally cold and calculated.
You can't, but you also have to establish very clear boundaries, and you've got to respect their boundaries. So, for example, I don't like the whole grind culture sort of mentality. I think it's immature, and I was pretty obsessive about not invading people's private lives and their time off of work. And if I ever had to call an employee after 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock at night, first thing I would always do is, I'm very sorry to contact you this late. I know you're at home. I will keep this brief, and it's an emergency. And the second thing is that I'd always offer them, hey, I made you work, I asked you to do something late last night, take the day off or whatever. Like, I always try to compensate for that invasion into their private lives, because the reality is that the company has the employees for a set amount of time. Outside of that time, that's their time. It's not yours, and you need to stay out of it. And every day we read these stories of, oh, my boss contacts me at 10 o'clock at night. I'll tell you right now, if you're a startup founder and you're contacting your employees at 10 o'clock at night, you are not a good founder. You need to figure out how to become a much better leader, because you shouldn't be contacting people at 10 o'clock at night unless it's an emergency, unless it's a legitimate
weird
crisis
stuff happens,
kind of
but it
emergency.
should not be normal. Well, I think you you hit on an important topic, right? It's really difficult to strike the balance of having employees, being friendly with them, not getting into some of the problems you ran into, right? But yeah, it's a difficult balance. And you brought up something else that was in your book, I think, that kind of parlays into this, is about like what topics you talk about at work with your employees.
Wow.
And I know you mentioned in your book that you don't think politics, sex, religion, stuff like that should be a topic at work. I'm going to guess you must have had some problems with this.
I have watched many companies, I've watched families completely ripped to shreds because of politics, and sexuality and religion and those topics. We live in a very divisive culture right now. A culture
in the United States, for sure.
My side's right, you're completely wrong and evil. This is only getting worse, and it's making workplaces completely untenable for some people. And what's really happening is when you allow, and I don't care what side you're on here, I don't care if you're that side or this side, if you allow your business to become dominated by either one of those sort of sides, you are, first off, excluding a huge chunk of the population, at least 50%. But secondly, you're also making an environment that's hostile, and it's hostile to people who might be really valuable to moving your business forward.
You lose no matter what. Like
you lose no
lose
matter what.
50%.
I don't care who you vote for. I don't care what church you go to, or if you don't go to church. And I don't care about your personal life and what you do in bed, or who you do it with, or how you do it. None of those things have any relevance to my business in any way, shape, or form. So take them home, take them outside, take them into the parking lot. And I mean, I got to the point where I'd hear employees in the break room, going, "Can you believe Trump said this or that?" They'd start going off on something. And I'd walk in and I'd go, "Outside. We're not doing that in the company. It's not happening here. You guys know the rules. No taboo topics." And yeah, a lot of people probably said, "Andrew," but it would kill the company. It would destroy our ability to do what we need to do.
But isn't this a common sense thing? Like, why would this be controversial?
I'm surprised at how many people really are like, "Well, you can't tell people they can't." I have a freedom of speech. And I'm like, you absolutely have a freedom of speech, but you're at work, and when you're at work, there's rules, and you follow the rules. And if you don't want to follow the rules, then you can not work there. You also have the freedom to quit and go elsewhere. And for that matter, work is not necessarily the public square. Yeah, you can go out into the public square of your neighborhood and scream about whatever you want and say whatever things you want. You absolutely have all the freedom of speech, but you don't get to do that at work any more than you get to do that in the middle of a classroom or the middle of, somebody giving a speech or something like that. We have decorum
So
in this.
there's another angle to this that is a big problem. So I had Billy Boozer on the podcast, who was one of the original chief product officers of Truth Social, which is
Okay.
Trump's
Yeah.
social media. And they were blacklisted by everybody. Like, nobody would even do business with them because of their affiliation with Trump. And that's the other weird thing you get into with this, where what kind of customers you do business with, right? Like, if you're Microsoft and all of a sudden a bunch of your employees are mad that you have the U.S. government immigration office as a client, that you have ICE as a client or whatever, like, what does Microsoft do? Like, they have all these employees that are activists, like, one way or another, and pick. It could be the NRA, it could be the DNC, it could be whatever, pick the thing. All of a sudden you have employees that are, have big opinions, like, oh, we shouldn't do business with these people. But as a business, you're like, I don't care, I'm just trying to do business. Like,
Right.
it's not about who, it's just we're doing business.
Right. And first off, it's a difficult tightrope to walk. But the other thing to remember is, as a business, you have all the right in the world as to who you do business with.
Yeah.
So, people get all sort of wound up about, they're canceling this or canceling that, and it's like, look, these are private businesses. They can do freedom of speech does not extend to, your interactions with a private company. It's not a space for, and more importantly, there's no such thing as freedom from consequences. You can say whatever you want, but that doesn't mean there's consequences for those actions.
And that is true, too.
Least of which being is that, all right, we're not going to do business with you, or, Mr. Employee, you're not part of the team. And I like to think of it as, the bigger question is, what is the culture of your company? What is the type of culture you're trying to build? I was very, insistent that I was trying to build a culture of smart people who are allowed to be smart. Like, I want to attract people who are intelligent, and I want to give them a space where they can be intelligent. And sometimes that means I had to let those intelligent people do some kind of crazy things. Sometimes it meant I had to kind of overlook their bizarre personality or their blue hair or their constant need to smoke weed in the parking lot. But that was the price. There's a level where you have to, like, what is it that you're trying to achieve as a culture in your business? And I knew that I might not like what this person does. Like, I might not like them as a person, like the guy with blue hair smoking weed. Yeah, I don't really want to hang out with this guy on the weekends, but the guy's smart, and I got to accept the fact that in order to move the business forward, in order to live the culture of smart people being smart, I've got to give this guy the room he needs. And I got to ask him.
Well, in Portland, that's like half the people, right?
Yeah, that's true. In Portland, that is half the people. But it also came to that point where at times I have to say to him, dude, look, I don't care that you're smoking weed and your hair's blue, and I don't care about your crazy sex cults that you're into. But dude, could you just please keep it out in the parking lot and keep it at home? Not at the office, okay? And I said, I'll respect you. You got to respect the business. And the fact is, he was an intelligent guy, so he got that. And I'm thinking about somebody in particular, by the way.
But I'm curious your take, though, about what about, like, the type of customers you have as a business? Like, you have a cybersecurity business. Like, would some employees come to you and be like, hey, we don't want you to serve this customer?
I actually had that a few times because I did business with government agencies. I did business with defense contractors. I did business with one of the largest defense contractors in the world.
So how did you handle that? You're like, we're doing business with them, I don't care? Or, like, well, how do you deal with it?
It's that simple principle of, like, it's their politics is not our business. Our business is to fulfill our customers' needs. We're here as cybersecurity experts. They have a need. We're there to do it. It's not our job to judge what they're doing as a business. That's not what we were hired to do. Some people didn't like that, and again, it's there comes a point where you have to set those sort of boundaries.
It's like,
and in the case,
you have to set that, and everybody follows it at some point
Right.
in time, right? You're like, no, this is the way it is. If you don't
Right.
like it,
And
that's all right. It's the way it is.
in my case, it was I like to think of that line from Ted Lasso. Great show, by the way.
Yes.
Encourage everybody to watch it. But there's a great line in the middle of that, and Ted Lasso's actually quoting somebody else, but he says, "Be curious, not judgmental." My CEO coach once challenged me to this. He said, "Live a day without judgment." And I'm like, well, I don't think I can. He says it's tough. But that was another value I brought to my own business, which is it's not my job to judge you or companies. I'm not in the judgment business. What I'm in is in the cybersecurity business, and I'm going to deliver those services. Now, of course, there's limits to that. There were certain businesses I didn't want to work with. But in some cases, I didn't want to work with them, not because I didn't like their business, but more simply, because they don't pay their bills.
Yeah, that too.
So
Yeah.
I used to say, like,
Or it's a high risk, like they're
yeah,
high
it's
churn,
like a high risk to do business
Yeah.
with them. One of my examples I always gave, which this isn't going to probably make me any friends among the legal community, but law firms, they're awful customers.
Yeah.
like, like, and
It's
I'm
not a
sorry,
political thing; it's an industry thing.
they just are. And so I
Yeah.
tell my, like, look, no law firms, please, because they're just too difficult to work with for a variety of reasons. Doesn't mean I don't like lawyers. Some of my best friends are lawyers.
Well, I really appreciate having you on the show today. It's been a great conversation. Again, this was Andrew Plato, Founder's User Manual. Check out the book. We'll have some links in the show notes, I'm sure. Andrew, as we round out the show, I'm curious, do you have any other last-minute like words of wisdom that you can drop on us?
There's a line from a book. It's actually the book that's sitting right there on my shelf. It's a book called the I Ching. And my father was a scholar of this book. It's a Chinese book of Proverbs. I won't go into a whole lesson on the I Ching, but there's a line from that book that kept me going in the darkest of times as a founder. And it's a very simple line. Perseverance furthers. The people who get ahead in life are not necessarily the smartest. They're not always the best looking, and they're not the richest always. They're the people who simply persevere through everything. So, yes, it's bad. Yes, it's awful. Yes, you fail. Every failure is an opportunity to improve and get better. Don't waste a failure. Figure out why you failed and how you failed. Dig into that and persevere through it. The difference between people who are successful and people who aren't is the successful ones just kept going. They
Well,
refused to give up.
they also choose to be the survivor, not the victim.
Right. Yeah, you are not a victim. If you choose to be a founder of a business, you made that choice. It's entirely your choice. You need to own up to it and be the adult all the time. And that means you don't get to be the victim and you don't get to whine to your employees
Yep.
because it's not their fault, you know?
Well, really appreciate you having you on the show today. Again, this was Andrew Plato. Thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thanks, Matt. I really appreciate the time as well, and good luck.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Okay, take care.